Okay, so let's get right into it. We're looking at a single document, a formal complaint, filed on January 25th, 2026. And honestly, this thing is just packed with some absolutely wild allegations. We're talking about accusations of a massive conspiracy that ropes in a university, major corporations, and even the state government. It's a lot.
Yeah, so the complaint itself just dives right in. It frames the whole thing as collusion by governmental and private entities. I mean, that's a really heavy charge, right? It tells you immediately that this is way, way beyond some simple workplace issue. So let's start digging into the details.
All right, let's break this down. We're going to look at the who, what, and why of this whole thing.
So the person who filed this is Dr. Mohammed Ibrahim Fayyad. He's described as a professor of software engineering and global innovator. And the whole reason this complaint even exists is because he was dismissed from his job on March 18th, 2025. He calls it a barbaric and illegal manner. So yeah, that language alone really tells you a lot about the tone and just how serious these claims are going to get.
So what even is a formal complaint like this? It's important to understand this isn't just, an angry letter. Think of it more like a legal trigger. It's a formal request submitted to a government body, in this case, places like the Office for Civil Rights, alleging that something really serious, like discrimination, has happened. And when they receive it, it can kick off an official investigation.
And you can see the strategy here, right? He sent this thing everywhere. We're talking federal level, the Department of Education, the Department of Justice, and at the state level, the California Attorney General's office. He even sent it to the Higher Learning Commission, the body that accredits the university. He's basically trying to apply pressure from every single direction, making it impossible for them to ignore.
Okay, so let's get into the actual allegations and the timeline of how all this supposedly went down. So according to the complaint, this whole thing didn't just happen overnight. It actually stretches back years. It all seems to start way back in the fall of 2018 with what's described as a misleading academic evaluation. Fast forward all the way to March 18, 2025. That's when Dr. Fayyad is actually dismissed. And then, less than a year later, on January 25th, 2026, this formal complaint gets filed. So that 2018 evaluation is presented as kind of the ground zero for everything that followed. And man, the language he uses to describe that evaluation is intense. He calls it a professional assassination. I mean, that's not just saying, I got a bad review. The complaint is alleging that this whole thing was a setup, a coordinated effort rooted in systemic racism and personal animosity specifically designed to end his career. And here's one of the key pillars of his argument. It's all about expertise, or the lack of it. So Dr. Fayyad is a professor of software engineering, but the complaint points out that the key people evaluating him, like a guy named Kay Horseman, were from the computer science department. It argues they had, and I quote, nothing to do with software engineering. The implication here is pretty clear. How can you get a fair review from people who don't even specialize in your field? The complaint frames this as a deliberate setup.
Okay, so a bad review is one thing, right? But this is where the story takes a huge turn. The complaint goes way beyond that and alleges a massive, coordinated conspiracy, what it calls an institutional mafia. Yeah, he literally calls it the government and university mafia. The document says, my case reveals a disturbing nexus between California state officials and the administration of San Jose State University. The claim is that this network creates this culture of silence and oppression, where people inside the university and the state government are all working together to protect each other and shut down anyone who speaks out.
And this is where you start to see the pieces of that alleged nexus come together. So on one hand, you've got people from SJSU, names like Joanne Wright from HR, Dean Cheryl Epperman, and Kay Horseman, the evaluator we mentioned earlier. But then it expands. It names an evaluator from IBM, Devesh Jadhav. And this is the kicker. It goes all the way up to the California state government, specifically naming Governor Gavin Newsom and Attorney General Rob Bonta. That's the core of this whole institutional mafia claim, connecting academia, corporate interests, and state politics.
So you're probably wondering, just how big is this supposed conspiracy? Well, the scope of the complaint is pretty breathtaking.
We're talking about more than 100 individuals and entities named in this one document. It's not just a handful of people. The complaint is essentially saying this is a massive, systemic problem, not just a few bad apples, but the whole system is corrupt.
And when you break down who's being accused, it's just wild. I mean, look at this. About 40% are in government and the legal sector. Another 25% are in academia and unions. But then you've got 20% in the corporate and finance world, 10% in healthcare. It's just all over the place. We're talking dozens of law firms, major banks, healthcare providers. The picture the complaint paints is of a conspiracy that touches almost every part of society.
Okay, so after laying all of this out, what's the end goal? What does he actually want to happen? The complaint wraps up with what's legally called a prayer for relief, which is basically the list of demands.
And the demands are pretty significant. First, he wants a comprehensive federal audit of SJSU's entire evaluation process. Second, he wants all the fraudulent evaluations and his dismissal to be immediately annulled, basically wiped from the record. Third, he's seeking full compensatory and punitive damages for the harm he says this caused to his career and his health. And finally, number 4, he wants criminal and administrative accountability for every single person he claims was involved.
And to support all of these huge demands, the complaint makes one final, really important claim. It says he has an extensive dossier of evidence to prove everything. We're talking recordings, documents. Basically, he's saying, I have the receipts and I'm ready to show them.
So all of this leaves you with a really big question, doesn't it? When you have a complaint of this magnitude, accusing so many different people and sectors of society, what does it even take to investigate something like that? How do you even begin to unravel a web that's allegedly this wide and this tangled?